Clock strikes 10 a.m. We'll convene the meeting. Which it just struck 10 a.m. So now call the meeting of the Vermont Criminal Justice Council on December 4th, 2024 to order. I'm broadcasting live from the Police Academy today. So enjoy coming down and having that opportunity to do so. Before we begin, I'd also like to congratulate the Academy, the entire staff, everybody from getting me in here to get me a place to park for graduation, to the ceremony, to everything that happened. It was a wonderful event. And I think folks deserve a hearty congratulations. And I look forward to the next one. So I think that'll be later in the spring, or early summer, I suppose. But many thanks to everybody for contributing to the success of that ceremony. It was wonderful, and I had one of my former students in that class, so I was able to get a picture of him and see his family. He's now a Vermont State Trooper, so glad to see that. I hope everybody had a good holiday as we're wrapping up the year. We're in that holiday season. But best wishes to all. Additions and deletions of the agenda is our next item. We do have one deletion from the original agenda that was sent out. Lindsay had sent out a revised edition this morning or yesterday. We will remove the Rule 14 waiver request that's on the agenda. Upon further examination by legal counsel, it was determined that in that particular case, the individual has met the requirements of the certification, the education requirements. So there isn't really a need for us to discuss or act on that. It already falls within policy. So we'll strike that from the agenda. Are there any other additions or deletions? I haven't seen any. So hearing none, we will move on to approval of the minutes. We have 2 minutes from our November 6th meeting. And the November 19 meeting. We'll start first with the November 6 meeting. So any motion to approve those will be accepted.
So moved.
So moved. I see a second by Chief Frank. Thank you. Okay, any additions, amendments, deletions, corrections? Okay. Hearing none. All those in favor signify by raising your hand and or saying aye.
Aye.
Long enough for Lindsay to be able to count you? Any opposed? And I believe we had at least one abstention. Any other abstentions? Okay. The minutes for the November 6th meeting have passed. The meeting minutes for November 19th, which were the hearings that we held. I'll entertain a motion to accept those minutes.
So moved.
So moved, Sheriff Anderson. Seconded by Justin Stedman. Thank you, Justin. Any discussion on those amendments, clarifications, modifications? Okay. Hearing none. Call the question. All of those in favor of approving the minutes of November 19th signify by saying aye, raising your hand.
Aye.
Okay. Any opposed? Any abstention? Hearing none. The motion passes. The minutes are approved. I'm just going to note, just for your reference, I'm working with Lindsay on a better voting system. There's technology that will allow us to track this a little bit better in Microsoft Teams. And so stay tuned for the early part of the new year coming up to do something a little more formal, short of an individual roll call. I mean, that's always an option, but I think we can be a little bit more efficient with the tools that are available in Teams. So we'll let you know when that happens. I don't think any training will be required. That's my goal. Anyway, should be straightforward and easy to use, just like all technology, right? Right. Okay. Um, moving ahead to the curriculum, I'm going to turn the floor over to Sheriff Anderson. We were presented with materials from his committee and team on the level 2 curriculum review. And Sheriff Anderson, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, everyone. Before you, you have our proposal that was created by the Level 2 Curriculum Review Committee. The makeup of the committee has members from the Vermont Sheriff's Association, Vermont Chiefs Association, Department of Public Safety, Attorney General's Office, Leagues of Cities and Towns, the Training Advisory Committee, the Vermont Judiciary, and the Vermont Police Association. We've met to date, we've met 10 times, 9 where we were able to conduct a meeting. We've also been supported by Academy staff, including Executive Director Chris Burkell, General Counsel Kim McManus, Director of Training Ken Hawkins, and the Level 2 Coordinator Dan Pennington. I think just for simplicity, I'll go through each of these proposals. We've included discussion, which I'll omit from my report out, but there's been a lot of work, a lot of thought into how to balance improving training of the level 2 system while also not breaking the ability to deliver people to the needed gaps within departments. So as we started muckling on to the various issues that were identified by Academy staff, legal counsel, and just general insight of the profession, the first issue that really came up was the gap in not having level 1 curriculum ever developed. Level 1 was developed, I believe it was about 2016. It is in our report, the exact date, but it was created in statute, correction, 2014. And we never developed the curriculum because, generally speaking, the requirement to attain a level 1 certification would require a similar level of training as the level 2 certification. So it just seemed imprudent to develop that. With the change in law enforcement staffing and the utilization of level 2 officers in patrol functions within agencies as they prepare for level 3 certification, became clear that we should probably have more training for level 2 officers, which would reduce academy liability, council liability, and also provide training that reduces an agency's liability in several regards. So the first proposal before you is that we establish what I'm going to call a joint academy. And so the first 2 weeks of what's currently our level 2 academy would become a level 1, level 2 academy. We build in blocks off of that, but I'll pause here in case there's any questions or comments or concerns. Seeing none. Our second proposal is that we adopt a Phase 1 Academy schedule that is attached as Attachment A. What this does is rearrange some of the trainings that officers currently receive in Phase 2 into Phase 1. And so what we're introducing is a class that has often been identified by the profession as difficult to obtain, which is the use of force defensive tactics training. We move this from a Phase 2 requirement to a Phase 1 requirement, which simplifies work for trainers as well as agencies to be able to get the necessary training as part of level 1 training. It also mitigates liability in the context that we are sending people out on the road, even under supervision, with the skills that are required for the defensive tactics and use of force training. You'll notice that there's only 3 days, which is less than the current 5-day program. What we still intend is that oleoresin capsicum or pepper spray, as well as the expandable baton training, will remain in level 2 training, but those would be available for certification as an in-service class, depending on what agencies need to deploy. If it's a patrol officer, we would anticipate they would attend that. If they were doing some sort of augmented role that doesn't really require direct interaction, we would anticipate agencies might not send a person to that, but that would be at agency discretion. So the 3-day program would be, the 3 days of use of force training would be introduced. It allows us to gain some efficiency in the context that we no longer need to have an additional 4 hours of training of basic handcuffing techniques, as those are integrated in the defensive tactics use of force training. And then we add on for level 2 and level 2 only, we add on a third week of training that would be required. And that will add an additional 8 hours of mental health crisis training, domestic violence training, practicals, as well as graded scenarios, and a final exam for the level 2 course. With this, we think that we address some basic entry-level requirements. We also alleviate agencies' concern about getting in-service training that can prohibit them from becoming certified just based on classes being offered and the number of instructors that are available. I will pause there for any questions or comments.
We have any for Sheriff Anderson or the team?
Mark, I may miss this and I might be getting ahead of where you want to go. So if that's the case, feel free to say so. But in just looking at this, is there no firearms training for level 1 officers?
There is still firearms training for level 1. I believe that's week 1.
So firearms is specifically listed on the training sheet for level 2, but it's not on level 1. So is that intentional, or why is that way? Unless I'm missing something.
Firearms is, I think you're missing something. It's week 1 with Thursday and Friday being the training days for that.
I think the question is on the checklist. I think that would be are you referring, Justin, to attachment C?
Yes, that's what I was referring to. It's specifically on the
Attachment
level
C
2
checklist.
attachment.
Yeah.
Yeah, but not on the level 1. So that's why I was confused.
That might be an oversight.
Okay. I just, because I would, yeah. All right.
Karen?
First of all, I want to say how much I appreciate the hard work that went into all of this. And I can't even believe we're looking at this so quickly after the IATA list report. So thank you, Sheriff Anderson and the whole committee for attending to this so quickly and so thoroughly. And this might not be the right place for this question, but I'm just thinking about the IATA list report and its citation of the lack of a relationship between goals and objectives, and then how the training was actually delivered. And I'm wondering if this group has considered that, and if you've established goals and objectives for each one of these training areas. Thank you.
Appreciate the question, Karen. No, we have not yet. And so our charge as a committee was to come up with short-term recommendations and long-term recommendations. The long-term recommendations is a far bigger issue to tackle. So we will be continuing work on that. But what we're looking to deliver is some short-term recommendations that improve the profession for the June Academy, June 2025 Academy. So that is the body of work that's before this group right now.
Excellent. Thank you so much, and job well done. Thank you.
Thank you.
My understanding is that we're going to be acting on today is the structure, the basic skeleton, if you will, of the level 1 and level 2, which that ongoing curriculum development and revision and improvement will continue to happen, particularly in preparation for the upcoming academy.
What I also anticipate, though our group has not really discussed this, is that the work that the level 3 curriculum committee is working on will also be a basis of work that we will then be able to adopt into the level 1 and level 2 curriculums. So because that work's already being done elsewhere, that's in part reason for the delay in not doing it right now.
Great. Chris.
I also just wanted to add quickly that, I mean, Mark is doing a great job of explaining this process and what has developed so far. All we're going to be asking the council to do today is to actually vote on the minimum number of hours that we're looking for each of these courses to take place, not the actual content that goes with it. And then the additional factors that Mark has still yet to get to.
Perfectly said. Great. Do we have any other observations? I think mine is I was happy to see this. I've kind of come in post IATList, and so I'm not, don't have the whole history of that study, review, and transformation. But this is the step, and a timely step in the right direction. And I was also happy to see the increase in FTO hours for both level 1 and level 2. So congrats on that. I think that's a good move as well. Any other observations or comments, things to share with Sheriff Anderson as the project continues?
Mr. Chair, I just have actually a question for Director Burkell real quick. Is there housing, lodging, is that optional or available at the VPA for a 3-week academy, or how does that work?
Yeah, it's still going to be a traditional commuter academy if folks choose to do that, but we'll make the room available for folks if they need to stay.
Awesome, thanks.
Great. Okay.
So moving on to the next proposals, we are looking to adopt what is referenced as Attachment B, as Colonel Stedman identified. There might be some omissions or additions that were unintentional. What is in our proposals, what is intended to be reflected, and some of this is just the timeline to get the work out, and we're working with Ken Hawkins to finalize the documents. So if you see duplicate information, if you see something like firearms added, that is incorporated into the Phase 1 Academy, or we are going to be explicit of the additional training that we are adding and where we're adding it. Briefly, with the addition of the level 1 curriculum, we are now going to bifurcate the Phase 2 requirements for level 1 and level 2. I'm addressing level 2 right now to say that we're going to now require emergency vehicle operations course as a requirement, report writing as a Phase 2 class, juvenile law training in firearms. I would defer to Academy staff on what firearms training for Phase 2 training would be in identifying that. Again, we did not discuss the curriculum specifically. And then we would also encourage, but not require, active shooter training, wellness, pepper spray, and expandable baton training for the Phase 2. Those are recommendations. Agencies are still able to utilize other courses. We are just identifying these as areas that would be a good standard to have and for agencies to consider.
So on Attachment B, you'd mentioned EVOC. I think is that one that needs to be added to that list too? It's in the proposal, but on the check sheet.
That was one, Chair, that was actually on there. It was just omitted when we were reformatting that form. So
Yeah.
Lindsay and I discussed that this morning. That will be one of the course contents that will be on the Phase 2 of the level 2.
Okay. So just so we're clear, then we have the level 1 Attachment C. There should be firearms on that checklist list, and then Attachment B, EVOC, should be on the level 2 list as well. Those are just technical production issues, not
Yes.
not intentional. Yeah. Okay. Sheriff Anderson, anything else you'd like to share or propose a motion?
I have, I think, 3 more proposals to share. So now we'll talk about level 1. Because we do not have the curriculum, we are building the car as we're driving it, if you will. The good news is that we have partners that have built most of the components of these cars. They have just not been accepted as curriculums or curriculi to the council. So we are working with those partners to do it. The level 1 curriculum is developed around state statute. So that identifies the scope of authority that provides courtroom security, vehicle escorts, traffic control, custodial transports. What we are recommending is that we partner with the Vermont Judiciary, who already has a curriculum for courtroom security work, partner with the Department of Motor Vehicles and the Sheriff's Association, who already has a body of work for vehicle escorts, Traffic control, there's existing federal programs for that body of work, and then prisoner custodial transports, which already exist with the Department of State's attorneys and sheriffs. So those are curricula that will be submitted for adoption by the council or the executive director, I think is who we actually delegate that to. And then those would be offered as part of phase 2. And then finally, we established the phase 1 FTO for level 1 at 60 hours, and we are doubling the level 2 FTO to 120 hours to address these additional training requirements and what we think is a defensible training standard.
Great. Do we have any further questions for Sheriff Anderson and the committee? And I think that's been a pretty good overview of the work, as well as the documentation you provided was quite helpful in advance. So, Chris, Director Brickell.
Just one more point, Chair, for clarification. The council has to approve a minimum number of hours for each training for level 1 and level 2. And so oddly enough, the minimum hours for the level 1 training would be 60, the same as the proposed FTO hours, as well as for the level 2, the minimum set of hours would be 120, and that's co-aligning with what Sheriff Anderson just proposed for the FTO hours as well. So the council has the authority and has to approve the minimum number of hours for each different discipline. And then the FTO hours is also what we'll need the council approval for.
So we're going to need several motions. Where would we like to start?
Director Brickell, please feel free to correct anything I say, because I know you're kind of driving some of this. I'll make a motion to for the council to set FTO requirements for level 1 at 60 hours.
Chief Frank seconds that motion.
Okay, seconded by Chief Frank. There's been discussion, but as protocol, any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Those in favor of setting the level 1 hours at 60, FTO hours at 60, signify by saying aye or raising your hand.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstention? Okay, hearing none, the motion has passed. Sheriff Anderson, second motion.
I make a motion that we establish the level 2 FTO training hours at 120 hours.
I'll second.
Seconded by, was that Karen? Okay, we have it seconded. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, we'll call the question. All of those in favor, say aye or signify by raising your hands.
Aye.
Any opposed? Or abstention? Seeing none, the motion appears to have passed and has passed. So we're good on that. Additional motions.
I guess this will be a point of order or point of information. I'm not sure which. Does the council need to approve the additional proposals?
The council will need to approve the minimum number of hours for level 1 and level 2 training. And as we just discussed, the minimum for level 1 would be 60 and the minimum for level 2 would be 120.
So is it deferred to the director for the remaining proposals as part of the establishment of those curricula?
You could add that simply because the documents didn't reflect accurately the things that we should have had on there. But again, the council doesn't approve the content, just the minimum number of hours.
For phase 1 and phase 2, for each level, do they need a vote? I believe.
Kim's
Yes,
going to correct
would-
us, I think, here.
yes, Counselor.
Yes, so per our rules, the council needs to establish the minimum hours for each phase. So level one, phase one, level one, phase two, level one, phase three. So we've done phase three, the FTO hours for both level one and level two. So we do need to go back and do level one, phase one, which would be that 2-week proposal. So estimating the minimum hours, and then the academy can go further, but just setting that baseline for the 2 weeks for level one and 3 weeks for level two in phase one. And then again, an approximate number of hours for the minimum for phase two for both levels.
So I'll make a motion that the council adopt 80 hours approximately for the level one, phase one academy.
So moved. We have a second. Seconded by Vice Chair Transgard Scott. Okay. Any further discussion? I think you've laid out those hours in the structure and in the proposal, so they're quantified to be 80. All of those in favor signify by saying aye or raising your hand.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstention? Seeing none, the motion passes. Sheriff Anderson, relative to
make
phase
a-
two, would you?
Yes, I make a motion that the council adopt 120 hours for level two, phase one academy.
So moved. Do I have a second? Chief
Friendly
Frank?
amendment? Friendly amendment, with, to
Yes.
include the word minimum.
Minimum.
The reasoning behind that
Yes.
is, as we haven't established the goals and objectives for each core curriculum, in the event that we decide that these objectives are greater than the 2 hours assigned to that class, it would allow us to expand or contract. So just friendly amendment to add minimum to that.
I accept.
We'll accept that as a friendly amendment. Thank you. So minimum is inserted there. Minimum of 120 hours. Okay, we have the motion on the table. Any further discussion? I will otherwise call the question. Those in favor, say aye or signifies by raising your hand.
Aye.
Any opposed? Or abstention? Seeing none, the motion passes. So I think those are the motions that we have at this point. We are we in a position to do phase two?
Chris, do you have the hours for phase two? Ken is calculating them now if you didn't, but
Yeah, I'm sorry, the hours that we had discussed, I was calculating them earlier were as the same as the FTO hours. So for the minimum of 60 for the level one of phase two and the minimum of 120 for the level two phase two.
okay.
And again, those are minimum numbers in the event that we find that there's additional training that goes beyond that.
Well,
And I'll call-
let's put a bow on this, and I'll turn to Sheriff Anderson for the motion.
I'll make a motion. Is it okay if we do this as one motion for both programs?
Well, we've parceled them out already, so let's do the same for, let's have distinct level one and level two.
So I will make a motion that we establish level one, phase two hours at 60 hours.
Minimum
Minimum.
of 60. Okay, second. Chief Frank got her hand up first. Okay, any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye, or raising your hand.
Aye.
Any opposed? And abstention? Seeing none, the motion passes. And then for our sixth and final motion on these phase parameters, I will turn to Sheriff Anderson again.
I make a motion that we adopt a minimum of 120 hours for level 2, phase 2.
So
A
moved.
second.
Seconded by Vice Chair Transgard Scott. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All of those in favor, say aye or signify by raising your hand.
Aye.
Any opposed? Same sign. Abstention? Hearing none, the motion passes.
Mr.
All
Chair,
right.
I'd just like to take a moment to thank the work of the committee and Academy staff. It's been a lot of work. We will continue our work, but I do appreciate the council's support of these motions.
Great, thank you, Sheriff. And likewise, I think the council's appreciative of the effort, and it'll be the ongoing effort. There's still plenty of work to do, but moving in a good direction. So, thank you very much for leading this as well. Great. Okay, we can move on to our next agenda item. We've removed Rule 14 waiver, which would be the council meeting dates. Not expecting too much controversy here. The proposed dates were sent in a separate file as part of the attachments, pretty much following the same pattern that has been used this year, with the regular council meetings the first Wednesday of each month, and then the hearings on the second or third Tuesday of each month. I'll open the floor to any discussion about that. If there are any ideas, proposed changes, comments, observations. I have to say, as the new kid on the block, when I first saw the schedule, I really didn't understand why a council would be meeting twice a month, but I do now. I understand the importance of separating the hearings from the regular business of the council. So I think the schedule will work well for this year. And if there are no alternatives, I would entertain a motion to adopt the 2025 calendar year schedule.
So moved.
Trevor Hill, so moved. And then seconded by Trevor Whipple. Okay. Any further discussion on the calendar? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor of adopting the 2025 calendar schedule of meetings signify by saying aye or raising your hand.
Aye.
I'm seeing a lot of ayes. Any opposed signify the same, or abstentions. Seeing none, we have adopted our 2025 calendar. Thank you. Get those dates in the book. I'm sure Lindsay will get them out on the Microsoft calendar for us. That's very helpful because I need them on my calendar to be sure they're there, as I think we all do. Moving ahead to the next item on our agenda, our proposed annual training requirements. I will turn this over to Director Brickell to elaborate for us.
Thank you, Chair. As everybody knows, or all agencies know, that they submit their in-service training requirements to the Academy between January and March of each year. Our mandatory training used to be spelled out in council rule, and it is no longer spelled out in council rule. So we're now basically going over what it is that we are going to accept as in-service training from agencies. And this list is already what everybody should be used to. It was the mandatory courses with the addition of three actual, two new pieces, three that are identified, however. So the 30 hours will still include the first aid and CPR that are either certified or certifiable trainings, their firearms qualification, the CEW qualification, if in fact you're carrying as an agency, the continued use of force mandated training, which is 4 hours with a VCJC certified instructor, the mandatory 2025 FIP training, which is the mandatory training this year for law enforcement, And then there is the inclusion of training on code of conduct, which is the new code of conduct for unprofessional conduct that's spelled out and will be in statute beginning January 1 of 2025. And then also training on scope of authority, which is what level 2 folks get as they graduate their first phase of level 2 training to make sure that they're clear on what their scope of authority is. And we have to assume that most agencies know and should know what that level 2 scope of authority is. But now we're going to have a level 1 and level 2. So we've added scope of authority training for everybody to make sure that that's a mandatory training as well. Both the code of conduct training and the scope of authority training are trainings that we believe that we can put together. That will be an online thing that will be available to agencies. That should not be mandated by our training. They can do their own training on scope of authority and code of conduct. And the last one is a mental health training component that, while I believe everybody and almost all agencies already do this, it's not a required course. So this would be mandated training that the council would seek approval for. And then, as usual, all agencies will submit their copies of all VCJC policies that they're required to have. Any questions on that in-service training piece? Chief Frank.
Chief Frank.
Not to be the naysayer, but I do have some questions and concerns. I have concerns regarding them being mandatory for this upcoming year and would offer the consideration of recommendation. Well, I think all of these things are incredibly important. And I do think moving forward in future years, they might be part of our mandatory curriculum. I have pretty significant concerns approving a mandatory course requirement when the specific classes haven't actually been created or the structure or objectives haven't been written. We're running the risk that we're going to implement programs that might not meet specific learning outcomes, that there's a possibility that they're going to be rushed towards the end because we're trying to create this sudden preparation. Is there an evaluation process to determine if this is effective? And furthermore, from a just a basic law enforcement standard as an agency head, we have a history in the past of creating mandatory classes that aren't offered until June of that year. And then department heads have from June to December to suddenly try to rush everybody through. The academy then tries to accommodate by saying, well, we'll just give everybody a waiver and we'll give you an extra 6 months. And I just don't think it's a good way to do things. I think the reality is we need to start doing things the right way. And the right way might be saying, yes, these courses are necessary. They are important, but we're going to do it right. We're going to get the curriculum. We're going to design the course, and then we're going to make it a mandatory course when we know it's available. What I don't want to see is another, oh my gosh, it's June, I got to push my guys through. And for me, October to December, everyone's taking vacations. Now I'm trying to figure out how to do training, taking guys off the road. I just don't think it's a good process for us until the course is written, the curriculum's ready. I'd rather see, we recommend this year that these things are also part of your annual training with the intention that the following year it becomes mandatory. Unless we can honestly say by January 1, these courses are done, ready, we know the curriculum, we've evaluated it, we have learning objectives, and we're ready to push it out starting January 1. And again, not to be a naysayer, I know it sounds negative, but I want to make sure we're doing things the right way instead of just trying to rush it through.
Sheriff Anderson.
I will echo Chief Frank's comments and not waste time repeating them. And then I would also, with regards to the CPR first aid, I mean, this is first aid and CPR. I'm not familiar with a certified first aid training. CPR is usually done by American Heart, but calling out that these need to be certified or certifiable training by comparable organizations. I'm concerned that we are in some ways being nebulous and in some ways being directive. There's 3 programs I'm aware of, which are leading edge trauma care training for pre-hospital, which is often where law enforcement is involved. One is, I'm going to use acronyms and I'm going to try to give you the explanations of the acronyms. One's TECC, which is Tactical Emergency Casualty Care. And then there's also TCCC, which is Tactical Combat Casualty Care. These are leading bodies of education for first aid, as we're broadly calling it, which is defined and developed by the American College of Surgeons, the ACS Committee on Trauma, Department of Defense, Department of Health Agency, Joint Trauma Systems, and the national, I don't know what the A stands for, but the NAEMT, maybe it's association. So those are two programs that are offered, and they are being considered as leading bodies of training, as well as Stop the Bleed, which is, I'm not sure if it's a certified or certifiable course, but also a course that is leading. So I just either want to call out that those should be allowable and includable. I see thumbs up from Lindsay and the head shaking, so I assume it is. But just make sure that we're looking at best practices and considering how we develop best practices.
Great, thank you, Sheriff Anderson. Um, um, Justin Stedman, please.
I couldn't find the unmute button. Sorry. Just real quick, Director Burkell, because I might have missed this. Is the scope of authority training specifically for level 1 and level 2 officers, or is it for all officers? Because I missed that.
So the scope of authority training would be for all law enforcement because agency heads, as well as officers that are working with those that have a less level than they have, should know what those limitations are and where their responsibilities take place. So if I could, while I'm answering that, just two things. I completely understand Chief Frank's comments as well as Sheriff Anderson's. These again were not, as I was trying to point them out. These are two specific trainings that we believe all of law enforcement needs. We were not saying it has to be the academy's class. We can certainly do that. We think that that is our role, where we can provide that training online. You're right. I can't guarantee that that would be done by the beginning of the year, but that doesn't mean that agencies could not conduct their own training on code of conduct as they see that appropriate, as well as scope of authority training. I'm also fine hearing the debate among council members on when it's appropriate that this is either mandated or this is a recommendation. In addition to that, the first aid and CPR, this is why this is worded the way that it was for certified or certifiable training, because there are many other programs and many other types of training that agencies find more comprehensive than the Red Cross or the American Heart Savers, first aid and CPR courses. So that's the language that's in there for that. But just want some clarification on why we were looking to add those two. And then it was mentioned in conversation in mandatory 2025 FIP training. That is statutorily enacted. So that is a mandatory training that would have to take place in 2025.
Chief Frank.
My concerns were more the code of conduct, the scope of authority, and the mental health training. Well, I recognize that certainly we can reach out to other agencies. There's other online programs, and individual departments could come up with their own training. I think that we need to make sure that if we are going to make this meaningful and effective, that we need to establish what those clear guidelines are in the curriculum and that measurable learning outcome. We run the risk that one agency here is teaching this on scope of authority and another agency is teaching something different on scope of authority. We don't allow that for other mandatory classes, right? And like there are very clear basic outlines of this is the information we need to know. And something specific as code of conduct, where a violation could result in an officer losing potentially their certification, their livelihood. Scope of authority, where they could again find themselves under an Act 56 professional regulation. I don't think that's something we want to leave to chance that agencies are individually teaching this. This is something we want the academy to very clearly establish. Here is what is allowable and not allowable under code of conduct, the expectation of behavior. And I think those classes, if they're going to be mandatory, I think they do need to come from the academy as opposed to reaching out to other agencies. I agree with first aid and CPR. That might be an option, but the people who should be talking about scope of authority, what you can and can't do in the state of Vermont, really should be state of Vermont certifying authority. As it stands under the proposed in-service, if code of conduct, scope of authority, and mental health training are in there, it is not a proposal I could support.
Director Raquel, do you have any further observations? I guess relative to my question is, maybe you can help me with this, is what elements of these requirements are existing? Recognizing that for the first aid, for instance, that there are other recognized sources that could be obtained, not necessarily directly from the academy. But is there a way that we could work this have some
Um,
element be required.
I think that, the argument is, or the argument that I'm hearing is that until the training is developed by the academy, since it is statutory language and it would impact Act 56, I can completely understand that argument. I liken this to, while we look at first aid and CPR and other types of certifiable training, firearms is mandatory within the state as well. But each individual agency teaches their own types of firearms training that they decide to use. They are required to still qualify a state qualification course, but they can also individually use other additional types of training for their firearms training, as well as they can with use of force. They still have to use a use of force instructor, and they have to use the MDTS curriculum, but they also have additional factors by an agency that they can do their own, their use of force policy review, other things that they decide as an agency are appropriate for them. So that was the line of thinking with these by adding them in there. The code of conduct it will be in the council's, it's already been approved by the council. So that's a statutory requirement that goes into play. Do they have different impacts for different agencies if they're not trained specifically? They could, but I think some things are fairly straightforward. I'm completely fine with leaving these as recommendations until such time as the academy provides that training, if that's the way that council would like to see that roll out.
I'll identify that the two things you listed, use of force and firearms, both of those have tactic instructor schools at the academy. So while yes, there is some independence that can happen at the department, all of the instructors have been taught at the academy what to teach and how to teach. So unless we're planning to create an instructor school for code of conduct and an instructor school for scope of authority, I think we're comparing apples and oranges here. So again, if we're going to have this a mandatory curriculum that must be instructed, we need to have already established goals, objectives, curriculum, and measurable objectives before we're going to ask officers and department heads. And then to ask a department, for example, to create, like, you must do this, your officers aren't going to be certified, but we don't actually have a class to point you to. Just create one, right? Like, you can do one on your own, but I don't have an officer that's been instructed in how to do that or what should be involved in that curriculum. I think we are setting officers up for a dangerous precedent, and we're impacting potentially the certification. It's a risk of resources. There's concerns over officer buy-in and engagement if they don't feel that this is clearly relevant to their role as officers. I think we should take a more measured approach, finalize the course content, establish clear objectives. I'm happy to participate in that if we're short on, bandwidth for staff to do it, and make it a recommendation for this year with the goal that next year it would be mandatory once those classes are in place.
Thank you. That seems plausible to me as well. I recognize the risk of having varied levels of instruction, or not having a consistent level of instruction across different instances of that delivery. So I could see and understand completely, as well as the concerns about not having materials available until later in the year and then trying to get it in. I think if we went with a recommended for calendar 2025, but explicitly, and let the minutes reflect that we expect that for 2026, that these would become required courses with any other, amendments that might occur during the year. Sheriff Anderson.
Not sure that this is a problem with the solution at the moment, but I also just noticed, and this has been a complaint I've heard from sheriffs, the CEW course requires the manufacturer's course as well as a Vermont-specific CEW course. And one of the things I've heard is a lack of capacity of instructors to do the Vermont-specific course. I don't know if there's a ability to get additional instructors, if there's an instructor's course, but with Chief Frank's mention of the capacity of instructors and certification, that has been a gap that has been identified from within my organization.
Just so the council's aware, that's also, concerns that we work on here. I mean, we've identified instructors that can provide that. We've also just sent Nick to the instructor certification for Axon and Taser. So he is now certified to do that as well. We'll be offering more of these as well regionally when we can put people on the road and get them properly certified. That was a very recent reflection on NIC certification. Ken, did you want to add anything to that? Sorry.
No, sir, you just identified exactly what I was going to say and let the rest of the council members know, as well as agency heads, that Nick's ability to get through that process, as well as being a use of force instructor, will make him more available for both agencies here and throughout the state, where he can bring that training to agencies that have just hired folks and that may have manufacturer instructors already on board and may not have a use of force instructor or somebody that's already master taser certified.
Great to hear it. Just, I fear a single point of failure. We've seen that with use of force and needing certain people who can sign off on certain things. And so this is just a capacity and bandwidth issue. But my agency doesn't have tasers, so I don't know what I'm talking about on tasers other than I've heard the complaint.
Sure. We have currently three municipal as well as one academy employee that are all now master taser, and I believe we have three state police instructors that are also capable of signing off on both.
Great. Colonel Wickham.
I appreciate the time and the conversation. In listening to the conversation, I also wanted to point out the general scope of mental health training. That is a wide field, and I didn't know if we were specific in pointing towards any topic within that large field. Are we talking about including officer mental health, officer wellness? Are we talking about response to people experiencing crisis? What is it that we're pointing to? Are we doing this on purpose? Are we pointing to a very general thought process?
And I think the addition of this, Lieutenant Colonel, is for the reasons of just that. Many agencies have very different, distinct needs. A lot of agencies have embedded social workers with them, have different response teams that they specifically train to for the communities that they serve. So while it's clearly a recommendation for every agency to provide mental health training, not only to their officers, but in their response to mental health situations, this was just as an included recommendation for in-service training because it was never before, other than the mandated training that folks have to go through. So, again, we don't want to be too specific on some types of training by then limiting what we are able to offer and not allowing agencies that expansive area that might suit their community better than just what we would offer.
Understood. And I appreciate that. I think it's important. Like you described, it is just a large degree of training, and different agencies need to have some leeway.
Great. So if we reached a point where I think that one of the key issues here is to codify the 30-hour requirement, and so we're going to need a motion to do that. And now the discussion I've heard is that I think these will be largely recommendations for 2025 to meet that 30-hour requirement, except there are some elements of that are going to be mandatory, right? They're statutorily policy required. So some portion of that, and I think Chris mentioned a few, code of conduct, FIP, those are going to be elements that will naturally fill in on that list, whether they're almost in a sense not necessarily recommendations, but they'll be requirements. Sheriff Anderson.
I'll make a motion that we establish 30 hours for in-service training for 2025, with required courses being bullets 1. I'm looking. What Chief Frank put in the chat.
Hang on, gotta get the chat up. Where's the chat? Oh, there it is.
I guess for the sake of recording, it's the first aid, CPR, firearm, CEW, use of force, and mandatory FIP training.
Okay, folks, seeing the chat. So that's the first aid, CPR, firearms qualification, CEW. And use of force, mandatory FIP. So the motion would be to adopt the 30-hour, oh, you want to state that again, Sheriff Anderson, before I botch it?
30 hours for in-service training with those 5 bullet points.
Okay. That I just read. So we would include in the motion firearms qualification, CEW, use of force, and mandatory FIP as required in that 30 hours. Okay. Amanda.
Hi, sorry, I don't have good reception, so I don't have my camera on. But the question, this is 30 hours for all of this, and so there's already 4 hours allocated for the use of force, so that leaves 26 to for all the other ones. And I'm not sure like how people will do then the math, and I'm just concerned that if we do a FIP training that's just 2 hours, that it's probably not going to be enough with the new policy, and we haven't developed that yet. So just a question around why the 30 hours and why adding clumping all those into that 30-hour max. But just
Chief
wondering.
Frank. Yeah, Chief Frank.
I've included for reference the 2022. The reason I did that is because there's every other year. Some years there's mandatory domestic violence training. Some years it's not included. The 30 hours is a minimum standard. Most officers do significantly more than that. The 30 hours is just the minimum standards of what folks may do. If you'll note, what we're requiring this year is very consistent with what we required in 2019, 2020, 21, 22, 23. All we're looking at doing is expanding out what those would be in our recommendations, right? Those new topical areas of saying, hey, we recognize we want to put some emphasis on some specific training areas and add recommendations. But if we were to look at 2022, 2023, we're actually mirroring exactly what we've done in the past. And that did include the FIP mandate policy. So the same number of hours that were available for FIP before would still be there, and officers could expand beyond that.
Amanda?
Yeah, I'm concerned about that just because in past years we have heard that the time was not enough and that folks that wanted to do it wasn't that many people that wanted to do more than what they were required to do. So I would like to not mirror the past, but look into the future about like what is it that we need. I just feel like we still don't have. Is it an all-day training that will be 8, and how is that going to impact everybody else? And so I am concerned about not having all the details of all the trainings, that we will vote on something that, we have heard concerns that the FIP timing was not enough. And Lindsay, correct me if I'm wrong, or if I am.
That is correct, just in previous years, so technically that training should be ready by the beginning of the year to allow the full year for law enforcement to get that training. But in the past, this past year, it wasn't given until starting in June, so they're only getting 6 months to get this training, which I think was what Chief Frank was referencing, that when it's a mandatory training, we should have it ready to go at the beginning of the year.
Right. Sheriff Anderson.
Just a point of order that a motion's on the table, but it hasn't been seconded.
Chief Frank seconds.
Seconded by Chief Frank, sorry.
No worries.
Okay, now the discussion's legal. So,
May I
Director
comment?
Brickell.
I will reserve my comments till after you go through the voting process and then bring up the comments that I have. Thank you.
Did we have, okay, Sheriff Anderson.
Thank you. The council's the one that's adopting the FIP training. So for Amanda's concern about it, I mean, that's driven by the council or academy on what that curriculum is and how long it is. I will note a frustration I have had when the council's establishing mandatory trainings that's taking away from my ability to look inward of my agency and identify trends and issues that we say we need to work on this. And so I think there needs to be a balance in obviously what we are required to do and need to do. But when I say I don't have issues in this subject area, such as I don't have an issue in use of force issues right now, I do have an issue in firearms. I might want to commit more training resources to firearms, but I'm now required to do 4 hours of use of force training. And while that's a personal frustration, it's one that I could quantify based on our recommendation here. I'm not proposing we change that right now, but as an agency head, it's concerning to me when we say we have to do a minimum of 30 hours. I get 30 hours a year for training each deputy. We do more with each deputy, but then we are trying to pull additional resources to do the things that we need to do, which is difficult at the agency level. So a lot of agency heads are looking inward, are already identifying things that they need to work on. I don't think that FIP would be shortchanged in what can be delivered based on past feedback. But we also have issues that we need to work on for our own local missions, our own local needs, our own locally identified gaps, which are putting agencies at risk on liability when we dictate what the entire 30 hours is. Thank you.
Right, so I think what I'm hearing is just a friendly, I would suggest a friendly edit to the motion to have that read a minimum of 30 hours rather than 30 hours. I think it was originally read as 30 hours. But again, minimum of 30 hours.
I accept that.
Folks are agreeing. Okay. Great. Well, this has been a good discussion. I think we've laid out quite a bit. Amanda.
Well, I do wonder if there is room for more improvement around like how we see this. What I'm hearing from the chief is that, and correct me if I am wrong, what I'm hearing is that the 30 hours minimum or the 30 hours is arbitrary in connection to the things that you need. And so that if you're already doing, okay, we have to do this 30 hours, it seems like and maybe this is for the future, that the hour requirement doesn't really, is not compatible with the needs of the officers and people that do the training. Like if you have, especially if you have a new policy, new things, you're gonna need more than whatever hours we had. Like the first year, a 2-hour policy, a 2-hour training on FIP was not, like that was the conversation that was happening at the legislator level, even back then, of how many hours people needed to do. So I'm just saying that I do have concerns and about the way that this is done, specifically thinking curriculum development and how just like putting hours into a content that's really important. It kind of limits the ability because we know that not every people is gonna wanna do more in some of the subjects, maybe not in all. So like I just wanna share my concerns for you all too.
Karen, Vice Chair Transgard Scott.
Thank you, Chairman. I really appreciate, Amanda, your expression of concerns. It's very reminiscent for me of our efforts to create mandatory training for domestic violence as an annual as an update for officers every 2 years. Looking back on first of all the use of our assertion that we needed mandatory training. That's a blunt tool, and over the years, believe me, I've heard from many law enforcement officers about how hard it is to have mandatory training, kind of in the feeling of it being jammed down one's throat. And 2 hours every 2 years is completely inadequate for officers to get the kind of training that they're needed to deal with the kinds of things that change over time in relationship to domestic violence. So, if we had to do it again, I would be thinking about this very differently. And so it seems to me that we're sitting right here in this nexus point with the FIP training. There's a couple, I think there's some really good variables that we should be considering. First of all, the IATA list report, which is establishing again that we need goals and objectives to lay out training curricula. We are working on that, so we don't have that yet. We also have a brand new position at the academy with Lisa Ryan, a highly qualified. I can never, Lisa, I know you're here. I'm sorry, I never remember your title, but I know that this is something you're going to be working on. So there's also that. There's and there's the policy, there's new FIP policy. And so I think we can recognize in 2025, we probably will need a little more time for officers to get trained on that policy. And I have full faith that all of our agencies will do their due diligence in providing that training. But I agree that maybe what we could consider is supporting this this proposal with the friendly amendment for 2025 and to revisit this after this year of transition passes and see what this looks like going forward into the future, so we can pass a policy that will serve us for multiple years. Thank you.
Yeah, I would. Yeah, thank you. I would agree, and I think that was I think the intent was to pass the current motion for 2025 with the full intent of re-examining it and any revisions for 2026. Just a comment, maybe Amanda, to address some of your concerns. It's not unusual for. Well, it's not unusual. It's typical for professional regulation, whether it's medicine, dentistry, any number of issues. You have a minimum number of hours. But what I heard from, and I'm hearing from law enforcement, certainly Sheriff Anderson and Chief Frank, that there may be areas where your agency needs a bit more relative to your community needs. That nothing in this policy would preclude an agency from addressing those needs. In fact, I would expect it as a matter of liability or responsiveness to your community. And the leadership and agencies would know best about what that additional training would be. So there's nothing in the policy that prohibits. I'm not seeing anything in the policy that prohibits. It's simply setting a floor, as many regulated professions do, to say that you need to do X amount in a year at a minimum to maintain a good standing. So, and I think that to Vice Chair Transgard Scott's comments, this is certainly worthy of very thorough reexamination as we approach 2026. But I'm also, again, sensitive to requirements that don't have a foundation, that don't have a curriculum, that don't have objectives. And again, seeing varied levels of instructions going on around the state and different agencies. So there is a real central role for the academy to provide that, again, based on the work the curriculum committee's doing, the IATA list work, to be very clear about what those learning objectives are, as well as I think at some level being sure that the instructors are prepared and capable of delivering that. So that's probably a long-winded observation. I'm not seeing anything that precludes with a minimum of 30 hours for this year, precludes us from really taking a hard scrub at this. At the same time, more curriculums being developed going forward. So that's my observation at this point. Are there others? It's been a good discussion. This is a good discussion. I think it's quite relevant and really something that we'll need to continue to have for contemporary training to be up to the task of the needs, recognizing that there are varied needs by agency or varied emphasis by agency, although around the core where we say that all officers must have, and some of that is statutorily driven, which I think rightfully so. It needs to be. So, any observations? We've been discussing the motion that's on the floor. Are we ready? Are we ready to take action? I'm sensing that. Okay. That's the case, then I will call the motion. I'm going to botch this up. I didn't write it down exactly, but it should be in the dialogue, but essentially to adopt a minimum of 30 hours of training as for the 2025 calendar year, with the 5 areas that are specified in the in the in the chat as required. And I think that's it. I think that's the motion. Am I correct? Did I miss something?
Sounds good to me, Chair.
Sounds good. Okay, I saw a couple heads nod. Therefore, I'll call the question. All of those in favor signify by saying aye or raising your hand.
Aye.
Okay, I'm seeing lots of hands and ayes, so any opposed? Abstention? Okay, Amanda, I saw
I
your
think,
hand go up.
yeah, I think I'm gonna oppose it just because of the
Okay,
matter of principle. I'm sorry.
Yep.
And just for the future.
Okay, so noted.
Thank you.
And no abstention, or is this an abstention, Mark?
Not an abstention. I believe under current Vermont law, we have to do a roll call because it is not a unanimous vote.
Okay. Well, then if that's the case, thank you.
Sorry.
I'm still new in the seat. I will turn to Lindsay for the roll. And we can work down that list.
All right, I think a couple people have since left, so I will pause for a few names, but I believe a couple have left. Scott LaValle. Daniel
See.
Guerra.
I'm gonna vote yeah.
Okay.
Sean Pratt.
Yes.
Jim Whitcomb.
Yes.
Glenn Boyd.
Yes.
Wade Cochran.
Yes.
Justin Stedman.
Yes.
Lori Vatican.
Yes.
Domenica Padula.
She left.
Yeah. Tim Luders Dumont. Same.
I believe he
Uh,
left as well.
Susanna Davis. Back. Mike O'Neill.
Yes.
Tom Jeanette.
Yes.
Jennifer Frank.
Yes.
Mark Anderson.
Yes.
Kelly Price.
Yes.
Trevor Whipple.
Yes.
Sadie Donovan.
Yes.
Amanda Garces.
No. I'm so
Karen.
sorry.
Karen Transgar Scott.
I'm going to support the dissenting voice and vote no, although in principle I do support the motion, but I think it's important for us as point of conduct to notice a dissenting voice.
Okay, we have 14 yes and 2 no.
The motion passes, but let's keep the dialogue in mind, and there's a lot of work to do to prepare for 2026. So next year when we have to do this, we should be fully prepared and have that plan in place and well articulated. So Trevor.
I agree, Mr. Chair, and would just add in for all of our thinking that if we are contemplating, moving to one full day for a certain topic, that for budgetary reasons, departments need significant notice on that so that they could factor in the additional overtime and staff costs.
Great. Right. So we will put this on, I'll have the executive director put this on his long list of things, but let's get it time stamped as well. I think it would behoove us not, to have this discussion in the fourth quarter, not later than the fourth quarter of 2025, fourth calendar quarter, in advance of the upcoming calendar year 2026. So good discussion. There's a lot of issues here, and these are the kinds of things that really need to be discussed and dovetailed in with training and the changing requirements that we've seen over time. Okay, moving along. Executive Director Brickell, it's your turn. Are you saving your other comment? We've already had the vote.
Yeah, I'm going to have my other comment just as an end cap to that discussion. A couple of things that just were not mentioned is that I think most council members know that we're transferring from our current management system to Acatus, which is a weekly project. Everybody here, all staff have been trained, but are making that migration to Acatus. So by next year, I'm hoping that by mid this year, agencies will have that portal that they will be able to document their training in Acatus for us. So there won't be this paper trail that we constantly have to worry about, and you'll be able to document that training for your own agency fairly soon. I also wanted to just mention that on IATLA's website, for those agencies that are looking for either additional training or training that is already certified by IATLAS, on their website, they have additional trainings that agencies can utilize if they so choose, similar to what Police One has for certified training. If you work with Police One and you decide that you want to use their training, IATLAS has a list of trainings that they have already approved and agencies can utilize. So I just wanted to make that aware. And also, just one final piece. I know that we vote on this. The council has to vote on this at the end of the calendar year or by the end of the calendar year, I should say, to determine what the minimum hours of training will be. And the points are well taken. Some of the things that I know are frustrating to law enforcement when we have statutorily mandated training that has to be delivered in 2025, and yet we're in early December and we haven't begun to put that training out yet because the FIP policy took so long to be approved, and now we have to create training that goes around that approval and those changes that's relevant to officers. So again, these are just some of the day-to-day troubles that we face in trying to provide agencies that training that they want and that they need to have by statutory requirement. And we're also looking at, what IATLAS delivers as we're moving along. So we're moving towards competencies and not hour-based training. We will be able to determine how long a training will take once we find out what those competencies are and how long it takes to meet those. But we are focused more on competency-based training as opposed to hourly requirements. That's the end cap to that discussion there. So I don't want any feedback. Thank you very much. I will move on to the next topic of our updates. I just wanted to have a couple of minutes just to give you some brief introductions on some of our new staff here. As you know, Lisa has joined us as our Community Inclusion Director. Lisa, I'll give her an opportunity again to address the council for those that maybe were not here at our last get-together. But Lisa comes to us after having the inaugural position of the Associate Dean of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at the Vermont Law and Graduate School for the last 2.5 years. She also has very strong ties to not only Rutland County, but the state of Vermont. She served on the Rutland City Board of Aldermen for 4 years. Her work history and expertise focus on restorative justice, diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives, mediation, conflict resolution, and systems work. And her previous roles have included the Director of Domestic Violence Response Systems at the Vermont Network and the founder and director of the Rutland County Community Justice Center. Lisa's role here as the Community Inclusion Director will be responsible for overseeing all fair and impartial policing initiatives, the fair and impartial policing trainer when that person is hired, creating and advancing various policies, data collection and analysis, and supporting the VPA and the VCJC, all with a lens towards equity and inclusion. Lisa, is there anything you would like to add to that?
Thank you, Executive Director Brickell. Good morning. It's really nice to see all of you and be in this space with you. I'll just add on to kind of what Executive Director Brickell said in that another thing that I'm really looking forward to is really connecting with police departments throughout the state and their communities and kind of building that relationship and transparency within each other. But I don't know, it's day maybe 11, I think. So everything's been wonderful. I feel really good about my onboarding process and having a great team here at the VPA. And I'm really, really excited about being in this position and doing this work. So thank you all for the support. And if you have any questions or thoughts or feedback, I'll put my email in the chat. But I look forward to staying connected with all of you. So thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. And just to continue on, for those who have not had the privilege yet of running into our new investigator, Vegard Bo. A brief background on Vegard is he was born in Norway, came to Vermont as a high school foreign exchange student, and then continued his education on at the University of Vermont. He started with Middlebury Police Department in 1999, worked as an investigator for 10 years, and was promoted to sergeant in 2012. He's been an instructor here at the Vermont Police Academy for over 20 years, teaching motor vehicle law and criminal law for both level 2 and level 3 programs. He tells me personally he's married with 3 kids, 2 boys and 1 girl, a dog and a cat that hate him. And he retired after 25 years with Middlebury PD and joined us in November of 2024. Vegard, would you like to add anything to that?
The cat hates me. The dog really loves me. But apparently I'm a dog person, not a cat person. So he senses that. And all of that, I've got, like Lisa said, it's been great to come here. Very hospitable environment. I'm looking forward to meeting up with all of you, and I'm going to be working with the PRS more so than the rest of this council. And I think it's a great experience so far.
And Vegard can start looking forward to helping create that code of conduct training that will be anticipated by law enforcement fairly soon. Also in updates, just so that folks are aware, with our upcoming 119th class, the paperwork deadline is this coming Friday, December 6th, when all packets have to be received. That date has been steadfast for quite some time, and the dates and the cutoffs for those dates allow us to get completed packets and have those medical portions reviewed by occupational health before folks are starting here at the next academy in February. We currently have 33 completed packets for this upcoming class. Many more supposedly on the way, but Friday is the deadline for that. Our PT testing dates after the deadline are December 18th, December 30th, and January 8th. Incoming recruits will have to pass one of those PT testing dates. And then our orientation begins on January 10th, 8:30 in the morning, and the academy beginning on February 3rd of 2025. That is about it for my updates. Any questions or anything that the council would like to know about those?
Great.
Okay.
Thank you, Director Brickell. Look forward to learning more about the 119th coming in as time goes on and we get past the submission date. Great. As we end the last element of the agenda, are there anybody else have some announcements or things that they would like to share with the council? We've had a good meeting, so don't want to prolong it unnecessarily, but I have a couple of observations, and I think I really like the conversation and the direction that some things are moving. And I think the key thing to remember is the issue of competency versus time. And the world is moving rapidly and has moved rapidly toward a competency-based world, not a time in the seat. And I think I heard that expressed a number of ways in our conversation about the 30-hour requirements. But I think as we move with the IATA list and work on assessment, and I think that's a key issue going forward with curriculum development, assessing the competency attained in any number of areas, whether it's policy, familiarity, tactical, et cetera. That's just a key piece. So we need to, I think, keep that in mind. I'll just share with you, I got finished recently working on a team that reviewed the Naval War College for their accreditation and learned a lot about the military shift from basically what we would consider time and seat type education to competency-based, objectives-based education under a 5-year plan. They're about halfway into it now, and that's really shaping what curriculum looks like in a lot of ways. So there's a lot of work to be done, and I see a great parallel with the IATA list project and what the curriculum folks are doing, and taking learning objectives and identifying those learning objectives. So the next key step to jump over is how we assess it and demonstrate the competency in those objectives and of the training. So lots to continue to be discussed, but I was glad to hear the discussion today about that. We have the legislative session coming up, so I'll probably see some folks. I live near Montpelier, so I'll probably see some folks around town. Feel free to drop me a note if you're going to be in the legislature. It's going to be an interesting time. It's always the start of a new biennium. Is always something to look at and see how the dynamics are going to develop there. The other thing I wanted to let you know is that I've been talking with the director Brickell about the need to develop a strategic plan, and so we're starting to move more firmly in that direction. Not quite, ready, nothing to unveil yet, but we're working on that, and you'll be hearing about that soon. I'm looking at a small group initially to develop the structure, and I think we have a pretty good structure. At least Director Brickell and I have been looking ahead. The need to do this, I think, is there. Particularly as we develop and need some new resources. It's much more successful to do that under a strategic vision with a clear set of objectives, much like we're doing with the curriculum. What are the objectives for the council and the academy over the next 3 to 5 years? And what are some of the things that we need to do and the resources that will be required to get there? So that, for instance, training can be adapted in a number of ways and developed, efficiently and effectively and delivered and available. Those are the kinds of things that I think we need to look at. So this is just a heads up. It's a little bit of vaporware. It's been vaporware, but it's starting to make its way into a more formidable process. So I'll be reaching out to a few folks, and certainly when we have some more structure around this, bring it to the council for some discussion. We're not there yet, but we will be, I think, in the first quarter of 2025. Probably sooner is always better than later, particularly with a session coming up. I think that's it. I just wish everybody a happy holiday. We do have another meeting, so we're not off the hook for 2025. As a reminder, I believe it's the 19th. Is that correct, or do I have the date wrong? I don't have the calendar in front of me. The third Tuesday, whatever the third, 17th.
Oh.
17th. Yep.
17th, yeah. And I believe we probably will have something there, a few items to act on. But stay tuned for that. As Councilor McManus will be working that, and we'll get information out. But I'll plan on seeing everybody on the 19th. So I will entertain a motion to adjourn for the good of the order.
Motion to
I think I
adjourn.
used up my motions, but
Okay. By acclaim, I suppose, all those in favor of adjourning signify by saying aye.
Aye.
I'm not seeing a lot of resistance. I will declare the motion passed in the Criminal Justice Council meeting in advance to our next scheduled date of December 17th. Thank you.
Thank you.
hello, everyone.
Have a good day. Thanks for a great discussion.